David pushed his plate slightly away, staring at it without seeing. The meal felt pointless, another quiet evening stretched out before him. He traced his fingers over the watch on his wrist, the one Patricia had given him years ago, and felt the weight of it press against his skin like a heartbeat that wasn't his. He'd told himself the ache had faded, that grief eventually softens, but tonight it clung to him again. Time kept moving, but inside, something still stood still. He leaned back, exhaled slowly, and wondered if silence was all that waited for him now. He looked up and saw her standing there, holding a baby close to her chest, her arms trembling just enough to show how tired she was. She didn't beg, didn't lower her eyes, she simply met his gaze with quiet courage. Her voice came out soft but steady. "May I have your leftovers?" The words hit him harder than he expected. No shame, no pretense, just truth laid bare. He studied her face, the kind of weariness that comes from fighting to stay upright when the world keeps pushing down. Without thinking, he pulled his chair back and said gently. She hesitated, clutching the baby a little tighter, her mouth parting as if to refuse. David shook his head softly, his tone calm but certain. "You're not intruding. Please." For a moment, she just stood there, caught between gratitude and pride, before lowering herself slowly into the chair. The baby stirred, a faint sound breaking the stillness. David called the waiter and ordered her a new meal, not leftovers, not charity, something simple but warm. She tried to protest, but her voice faltered. He only smiled and said nothing more. When the plate arrived, she stared at it for a long time before taking a bite, her eyes glistening as though every taste carried both relief and shame she couldn't hide. Between small bites, Christina began to speak. The words came slowly at first, then with the quiet release of someone who hadn't been heard in a long time. She told him about leaving in the middle of the night, carrying only a few clothes and her baby. About the diner job that vanished without warning. About the shelter that gave her a bed but not a future. Tomorrow, she said, there was a hotel interview, housekeeping, just enough to start over. David said nothing. He listened, his chest tightening as he watched her cradle the child while speaking of fear like it was a routine she had learned to live with. He thought of Sarah, his own daughter, safe, secure, unaware of what some people must survive just to stand where they are. The thought pierced him deeply. What if it had been her? Their words began to flow more easily, no longer measured or guarded. What started as small talk turned into something deeper, two lives unraveling their stories across a single table. Christina spoke of what she wanted most, to finish her nursing degree, to build something steady for Lily, to stop running. David listened, feeling something stir in him that he hadn't felt in years, recognition. When he mentioned Patricia, he smiled faintly, remembering her voice saying, "Everyone deserves a second chance." The truth of it settled between them, quiet and certain. By the time the last cup of tea had cooled, neither wanted to break the silence that followed. It wasn't awkward. It was trust, fragile but real, forming in the soft pause between two strangers who suddenly David's gaze dropped to his hands as he spoke, his voice low, almost reflective. He told her about Mr. Kowalski, the man who had once seen something in him when no one else did. The man who gave him his first real job, a chance to prove himself when he had nothing but hope and a young family to feed. He taught me, David said quietly, that success isn't about what you achieve, but what you make possible for others. Christina tried to hold her composure, but the tears slipped through anyway. She nodded, clutching the card like something sacred. "I'll call her tomorrow," she whispered. "I promise." Lily shifted in her arms, making a soft sound, eyes blinking open for a moment before drifting back to sleep. David smiled faintly at the sight, the small, breathing reminder of everything that still mattered. In that quiet moment, he felt the circle of his life tighten, connecting his past act of mercy with the one he had just offered. Didn't feel like strangers at all. David reached into his jacket and pulled out a small card, his movements slow, deliberate. He turned it over and wrote a number on the back before sliding it across the table toward her. "Call Helen Martinez at the Harrison Foundation," he said quietly. "Ask for help, please." Christina stared at the card as if it were something she wasn't meant to touch. Her fingers trembled. "But why?" she whispered, her voice unsteady. "You don't even know me." He looked at her for a long moment, his eyes softening as the weight of an old memory pressed forward. "Because 35 years ago, someone helped me, too." The words came out low but certain, carrying the quiet gratitude of a man who had never forgotten what it felt like to be seen when he needed it most. Christina stood slowly, adjusting Lily in her arms, her gratitude too large for words. David watched her gather her things with careful movements, each one carrying the weight of exhaustion and new hope. Before she turned to go, he asked gently, "What time is your interview?" 10 o'clock, she replied. "At the Marriott downtown." He nodded, a faint smile touching his face. "Tom Bradley's an old friend," he said. "I'll give him a call, not to guarantee anything, but to make sure they see what I saw tonight." David sat back in his chair, eyes drifting toward the faint blur of city lights beyond the window. He didn't see buildings or movement, just flickers of small, steady lights that reminded him of people finding their way through darkness. He thought about Christina, about Lily, about Patricia, and the quiet thread that seemed to connect them all. He understood now that what people called charity was often just grace wearing another name, something shared, not given. That night at the cafe hadn't only changed her path, it had reached into his own emptiness and drawn him out. One act of kindness had bridged years of silence, decades of quiet grief. In helping her, he had found a way back to himself. And somewhere out there, a young mother was doing the same, holding her child, building a life, keeping that small light alive. He stepped outside and felt the cool air move against his face, familiar yet different. It was the same season, the same faint chill that once made him feel alone, but now it carried something softer. He stood still for a moment, breathing in the quiet, aware of how much could change without the world noticing. Somewhere across the city, Christina was likely easing Lily to sleep, her day ending as his began again. He thought of how one small choice, one simple, "please, sit," had rewritten two stories at once. No grand gestures, no miracles. Just a quiet act of grace that had bound two lives together in ways neither could have planned. He looked down at the watch on his wrist, the gift that once marked time now reminding him of something deeper, that some moments don't pass, they stay, quietly shaping everything that comes after.